Okay, so what do you want to talk about?
What do you mean by natural meditation?
Um, Angelo talked about this at the retreat that he led, and what natural meditation is that you after you establish a practice, right? In other words, you have a practice. There's no concern about whether you're going to meditate or not. You know you have a practice. You're going to do it every day. Once you have a practice and you're doing it consistently, then you want to start to see if when you go to practice, you and all the other factors have to be there. You know, the specific time that you're going to sit, the posture, the relaxing of the body, all these things are still there, right? So when you go to sit, when you first sit down, after practicing sufficiently over time, it gets to the point when you go to sit down to practice, your body and your mind kind of know what's going on, and they kind of automatically start going into the meditative state. Okay, so when you're in that place with the practice, then what you want to do is you want to start with the breath to get yourself grounded, right, and anchored with the breath. That keeps you in present time. And then you want to practice staying aware of the breath, right? So you don't like just go to, stop being aware of the breath. Now you stay aware of the breath, but then after you're aware of the breath, you let the attention go wherever it wants to go. So in the formal practice in the beginning, we're aware of the breath, and then when a thought occurs, the practice is to notice that a thought occurred, and as soon as you recognize that thinking started, to come back to the breath again. That strengthens your ability to maintain your focus of attention, that's the primary thing you want to be able to do. And then once that's strong, you can relax the body, be aware of the breath, let the attention go wherever it wants to go, but you're watching it. You're aware of it. If you're thinking, you know you're thinking. If the attention goes to a sensation in the body, you know you're aware of a sensation in the body. If the attention goes to a memory, you know that it went to a memory. This is called being awake. Obviously, right? You're practicing being awake now, meaning that you're grounded, you're in the present moment because you're maintaining awareness of the breath, right? But now you're becoming the witness in the sense that you're watching what's going on in your internal state. And this is critical because if you're going to be awake, it means you are aware of what's going on, not only in the world, but in your mind and in your body and in your emotional state. So now with this awakeness, this awake state, you can now start to bring your practice off the cushion. You can now start to bring the formal practice into an informal practice. In other words, now because you can do this practice where you're relaxed and you're aware of the breath and you're paying attention to what's going on in the inner world and the outer world. You can do that anytime, anywhere now. You don't have to have the setup for formal practice. Now, you would continue to do the formal practice so to continue to deepen your ability to maintain focus, right? And strengthen your ability to maintain awareness of the breath. So you want to keep that practice going. It's just like a musician. A musician, if it's a good musician, right, when they're not performing, right, every day they keep practicing anyway. They keep practicing on the instrument every day, right? And the practice sessions they go through are an attempt to continue over time to keep developing and cultivating their ability to play the instrument. Same thing here. Cultivating your ability to be the instrument, not play the instrument, right? Or you could say play the instrument if you want to refer to, using your mind and working with your mind and so forth. But the idea is the natural practice of meditation lends itself to your being able to begin to expand the practice so that during the day, whenever you have time, when your attention is free and it doesn't need to be on anything, that you naturally, if it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes, you naturally sit down and you just go into a meditative state for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And you start to create a habit of meditation as a consistent practice, not just formal, but in your everyday life as well. This is important because if you want to be awake and if you want to have an awakening experience like Kensho, you've got to start to close out the mindlessness. You have to start to eliminate the mindlessness by practicing mindfulness, by practicing being constantly awake and aware. And if you practice that the way I'm describing and you do it more and more consistently, eventually Kensho will occur. In other words, you will have created a critical mass of awareness, right? And so you'll have this distinct experience, right, of the shift. And the shift is actually not a shift from being a personality, right, to be in the awareness. We talk about it that way, right? But it's actually not a shift in terms of you change from being a personality to being the awareness. No. We talk about it that way, but the reality of it is the shift is actually the completion of the recognition that you're not a personality. The completion of that recognition. In other words, what this shift means, what Kensho means, is after Kensho, after Satori, after the shift, you now are oriented as awareness. That's the distinction. You're oriented as awareness. And when you're oriented as awareness, your view changes. Your view changes. Now you're seeing from awareness instead of seeing from the view of the personality. The view of the personality is affected by the thoughts and the emotions, right? They color what you see, right? And it's affected by conditioning. It determines the way you perceive things, how you see things, right? After the shift, the conditioning is no longer determining, your view is no longer given by your conditioning anymore. Your view is now given by awareness, and you can watch the conditioning, but it is not running the show anymore. You can watch the conditioning. What do I mean by that? Well, watching the conditioning means now you're awake, you can watch the thought process, you can become a witness, you can watch the emotional processes, you can be aware of what's going on with you at all times. What's going on in the system, right? You can be aware of what's going on in the system at all times, but now you're not in the system and you're not being the system. You are the awareness that there is a system, right? And so what that means is you're free from being limited to what behaviors come from the system. You're now free to be able to produce behaviors that are being produced because they are a response, a realistic, mindful response to what's happening. And that's where we want to go. We want the natural state to be how we are. The way we're being is the natural state. So we're coming out of a mechanical state. We're coming out of being an automaton. We're coming out of an automatic way of being. We're coming out of a habit pattern way of being, right? And we're coming into an awake state of being. And this is radically different. It's radically different. Your view is different, you know your view is different. You know that you're now seeing things free of a lot of distortion. So for example, when you wake up in the morning after you have had Kensho or after you've had this awakening experience, when you wake up in the morning, if you wake up and there's a certain mood, you know how you wake up in a mood, right? After Kensho, when you wake up and there's a mood, you see the mood distinctly. Instead of waking up and you're in the mood, right, and the mood is affecting you, no, you wake up and you see the mood, but you're not in the mood. And because you see the mood and you recognize it as a mood, right? And you don't resist it, right? But you're aware of it, all right, the mood disappears. This is the power of being awake. Power of being awake. When you're awake, anything that you allow to experience, any experience that you don't resist, right? And when you're awake, you don't resist anything, right? You're here, you're present, you're in life, you're dancing with life now. You're awake, you're alive, right? And because of that, as experiences occur, and there isn't any resistance, the experience comes into view, whatever it is, an emotion, a thought, right, comes into view, it's recognized, and it's experienced, and when it's experienced, it disappears, right? So this is what it means to be present. To be present means that you are awake and aware of what's happening, all right? And as things are happening, you see them, you recognize them, and then they go. They come and they go, right? So there are things. So now there's the freedom to allow life to move, the freedom to allow life to be life, to allow life to happen the way it's happening without resistance. And because that's the case, you don't get stuck. You don't get stuck. What do I mean by that? I mean that in the ordinary state of mind that most people are living in, they get stuck. It's sticky. You get stuck a lot. Why? Because you resist. Anything you resist persists, and then you're stuck. Like that. And it can happen and it's happening in the background, so it's not like people know like that happened. They feel the stuckness, they feel that they can't shake off the mood, they can't shake off the emotion, right? They can't get out of the thought process, right? They're aware of that, and that causes suffering. It's uncomfortable, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to get out of it, right? And the way things occur to people when you're in a personality state, right? The way things occur to people is whatever is going on with you that feels uncomfortable, that's not working, the attribution, what you attribute it to, is out there. It's out there. So if I'm uncomfortable now, given my mental state, right, and given my identification, if I'm uncomfortable, I start to look to see what's causing this. You causing it? See, if you're causing it, then I have to deal with you. I have to stop what you're doing to make you stop making me uncomfortable. When in truth, that's not what's happening. You're not causing me to be uncomfortable, no. My conditioning got triggered by you, right? Because you reminded me of my brother when we were kids and he stuffed my mouth with worms. He did, by the way. So that got me upset. And I didn't know the difference between my brother doing that and you right now. You see, that's how we get confused and we get stuck. So when you wake up, then you start to see that you're triggered. You recognize that you're triggered. And when you're triggered, you recognize that you're triggered and you're watching the triggering. You're watching the emotion for it. You're watching the thoughts about it, right? And you're also watching the compulsion of it, right? Because when you're a personality, you believe you're an actor. You believe you're an action figure. You believe you're a doer when you're a personality, right? So when anything happens, there's the feelings, there's the thoughts, right? And then after that, the pattern of behavior that's consistent with those particular thoughts and feelings happens, and it's automatic. It's automatic, right? Well, we're not happening by ourselves yet, right? We have to intentionally happen. We have to intentionally be awake. And so we use these techniques to do that. And so you could count the breath if you're having difficulty maintaining focus. You could use a mantra if you're having difficulty. In TM, they would give you a mantra, right, with the idea that you would need to use a mantra to be able to maintain your focus. That's why they would give you a mantra, and that's a legitimate technique, right? And for people that practice TM, they use the mantra and they practice TM the way they were taught to do it, and that's the end of it, right? Now, but in this work that we're doing, right, our goal is to intentionally wake up. See, in TM, I mean, I can't talk that much about TM because I didn't actually study it, right? But my understanding of it is the idea there is just if you practice transcendental meditation, there will be a transcendence. You see, transcendental meditation, there'll be a transcendence. If you practice it over time, right, there'll be a transcendence. And that's true. There will be a transcendence. But in the work that we're doing here, we're practicing, but the idea of the practice is we want to practice with a lot of structure, with less structure, with less structure, with no structure, so that we can eventually get to the natural state. And the other thing about the practice here is that the practice here, more so than in TM as I understand it, involves a learning process, a deepening of the understanding as well. So here, where we are intentionally practicing meditation to wake up. We're intentionally doing that. We're learning about what that means. What does it mean to be awake? Why do I want to be awake? How would that be different from the way that I am otherwise? These are all important things to understand, because one of the things that will motivate you to do the practice and to develop the practice till it gets to the point where it's natural, right, is your understanding of the consequence of not doing that, which means there has to be a learning piece there. That's the purpose of the talks, right? In Zen, for example, and in most meditation practices that I've ever been around, the group practices and then the teacher gives a talk. The purpose of the talk is to educate you about what we're doing here, to give you more and more deeper understandings of these teachings and practices. And they're so deep. They're so deep. If you look at the Advaita Vedanta, now Vedanta is a teaching. It's a teaching. And if you know anything about the Vedanta, which involves these ancient Indian teachings, they're very comprehensive and very deep, and there's a lot of material there. And so you have people like the guy in New York that I often listen to these days, the guy who teaches the Vedanta. Someday I'll memorize how to say his name. It's one of these 25-cent names. But he's teaching out of those ancient teachings. So when he teaches, it's very interesting. He's really an excellent teacher, and he talks about non-dual teaching. And when he teaches, he'll give you a concept about non-duality, for example, and then he'll actually say in Pali or say in another language, quoting from the text that are saying what he's telling you. So that gives you an idea how deep this material is. And as far as I'm concerned, part of being a student of meditation and these practices involves curiosity. Curiosity. It is natural to be curious about your identity. It's natural to be curious about your identity. When you come to realize that you don't know what you are and you never will, it's impossible to know what you are. It's a non-conceptual experience. It's a mystery. It's a mystery, but it is an amazing reality. Consciousness is an amazing phenomenon, isn't it? Yeah, and if you really look at it that way, like, you know what I mean, that you're learning about an amazing phenomena that most people don't pay much attention to at all. And not only is it an amazing phenomenon, but it's such a key aspect of what it means to be a human being and what it means to be a human being and be able to experience life with a quality experience, to quality of life, to be able to experience life with a way of being that will allow you to be satisfied, a way of being that will allow you to be happy, a way of being that will allow you to be effective in dealing with everything in life, dealing with death, dealing with sickness, dealing with old age, dealing with the body, dealing with maintaining the body, being aware of the body, all of it, dealing with relationships. These are the things that matter in our lives, aren't they? Yeah, your health, your body, your relationships, right? The inevitable things that you're going to have to deal with in life, and being prepared for that instead of having it shock you, when things happen because you never gave it any attention. Yeah, so these teachings are not meant to be some kind of airy-fairy fun, and a lot of people approach it that way. They approach it like a drug, you know what I mean? Whether they realize it or they say it or not, a lot of people get involved with meditation because they're into getting high, right? Because they got high from taking hallucinogenics, and there's a lot of material written about the relationship between hallucinogenic highs and what you can get from meditation, right? I mean, that's what happened with Ram Dass when he went to India after him and Timothy Leary were taking acid for a while, and they both got fired. He went to India to get a guru because he had heard that you can experience these states of consciousness that could be called getting high to people who are used to that culture, right? By practicing meditation. So a lot of people get into meditation because they want to experience a natural high. There's nothing wrong with that, but somewhere along the line, you've got to let that one go and understand that, okay, that may have been one of the reasons that you got here, but this is about waking up. This isn't about getting high. And it's very important to understand that, because the happiness that's available when you're awake doesn't mean that you're gleeful all day long. It doesn't mean that you're joyous all day long. No, the happiness is a context. It's a context. In other words, I am happy. I'm happy to be here. I'm just happy that I exist. Now, then things happen, and when things happen, I may feel sad, I may get frustrated, I may have anger come up and all that other stuff. But all that's happening inside the context that I'm happy. Do you understand? So happiness for an awake person doesn't mean that I feel good all the time. No, it means that I am in a state of well-being. I'm in a state of happiness because I have accepted life as it is. I know who I am, okay? So that's a setup for happiness. I'm just happy that I'm awake. I'm just happy that I have an appreciation for the reality of life that allows me to be present to life the way life is, right? Instead of thinking that I know better than life, and therefore when life presents me with things that are different than the way I think, I don't accept it. That's about as stupid as you can be, because you can reject it all you want. It's not going to change to suit you. It's about time you notice life doesn't adjust to your needs. Life doesn't adjust to what you want or your whims, right? No. If you want to be happy, you do the adjusting. Life doesn't do the adjusting, right? Yeah, so if you want to be happy, you get into a dance with life. And when you're awake, you understand that your behavior is always in a dance with the way things are occurring for you. I mentioned this in one of the other classes. This is high-level understanding. Human behavior, your actions are in a dance with the way things are occurring for you. And when you wake up, the way things are occurring for you is different. And therefore, the way you behave is different. It's natural, right? It's not like you're practicing behaving a certain way, you know what I mean, to meet some standard for moral behavior or whatever it is. No. That's the thing. When you're awake, you are moral. You're not following morality. You're not obeying the law. You're aware of the law naturally, and you're just naturally being moral, right? That's the way things occur to you when you're awake, right? So this is the magic of enlightenment. The magic of enlightenment is that the way things occur for you is different, and the way you act becomes different. The way your being becomes different because the way things are occurring for you is different. The way you see things is different. So it's a complete transformation. It's a complete transformation. And you know, if you start to practice meditation, and you're doing it with guidance, and you're doing it correctly, and you're studying the teachings at the same time, you'll know that's the case because you'll start to experience something moving. You'll start to experience something changing. You start to experience, for example, if you're practicing meditation the way it's meant to be done consistently, you'll start to notice your mind's calmer. You're not as crazy as you were. You're not as uptight as you were. You're not as anxious as you were if you're practicing correctly. You don't experience depression, or if you do experience depression, it doesn't stay, right? Because now you're awake and you're alive, and you can be present in such a way that when these experiences occur, when fear comes up, you'll be afraid. You don't resist it. If sadness comes up, you'll be sad. You don't resist it, right? That's the application of wisdom. The application of wisdom. Whatever is happening, experience what's happening. That's all you have to do. That's the natural state. is whatever's happening is what you're experiencing. And it's a non-dual experience when you come to the realization and you're awake to the idea that who you thought you were doesn't actually exist. It's just part of what's happening. Who you think you are as a personality is still here, right? But it's no longer who you're being. No, it's now just part of what's happening. And what's happening is all there is. That's non-duality. What's happening is all there is. That's non-duality. Practice means that you're going to lose, you're going to become mindless at times. You're going to be blind at times. You're going to get caught up in a reaction without noticing it until you're deep in it, right? Yeah. But if you can talk about it the way you just did, it's a practice because you realize it. And you realize that, okay, the key with anger, the enlightened approach to anger is to feel it, right? Be aware of it, right? But have natural discretion about your behavior as far as your anger is concerned, right? Come to practice being aware of your anger in such a way that you can experience it fully, right? But what you say and what you do is something you have say-so about. And that can't happen unless you're awake. Obviously, right? If you're not awake, you're totally identified with the anger, and then the anger's running the show. And then you can, in a situation like that, you might get nasty and you might, say something threatening or whatever the case may be. And then after you calm down, you realize, Jesus Christ, what did I do? I could have got arrested there. Because you're awake enough, you're not threatened by experiencing the anger. And you understand how important it is to not let the experience take over your behavior. And you can practice that. You can practice being angry, being aware of the anger, feeling the anger, right? But also paying attention to how you express it or if you express it. And that's a practice. It's an ongoing practice. And you get better at it, as you're paying attention and things happen that don't work, you make a note of it, right? And the whole thing, whether we're talking about managing emotions or we're talking about managing thought processes or managing physical states, right? It's all about the same thing in the end. It's all about the same thing in the end. And what it's about in the end is you want to get to a place where you've established a natural way of being that is the middle way, that isn't going to be extreme in any direction, right? When it comes to your emotions, you're not going to inhibit your expression of them, and you're not going to let the emotions take over either. That's the middle way. And we're looking to establish the middle way as a way of being that's consistent as we live our life. Even in meditation, we're practicing the middle way, right? Because I said here to you, notice where you're at. If you're anxious when you're sitting here, see if you can calm that down, right? If you're falling asleep, see if you can bring that up. The middle, find the middle way, right? They always use the analogy of a musical instrument, right? If you take a guitar and you turn the string too tight, right? It doesn't work. It'll break and it'll be out of tune. If you loosen the string too much, it doesn't work. You have to tune it into a middle way, and then you can have music. It's the same thing with these practices. We're looking to experience the way to be in the world that's not extreme in either direction. Not too much, not too little, in the middle. That's always what works. But as you get better at this, you're not doing anything. You're just there. You're just there. And when you get to that point, the natural state involves your being able to naturally be present in a mindful way. It's no longer something that you're practicing. Although you may still need to practice in certain situations, right? You'll start to know the difference. You'll start to know when you're in the awake state. And then you can trust yourself. You can trust your expression in that state. But you may discover that there's certain situations, right? When you get triggered in certain situations, that gets wobbly, or you're not really as clear as you could be, right? So if that happens, you make note of that, right? And then continue to practice. That's one of the reasons why Rupert Spira says when people ask him about being awake and about how consistently calm you are, how often upset occurs, right? His answer to that, and my answer to that, is not much, not very often, right? But I'm never going to say no, never. Because something may happen in my world that triggers something that hasn't been triggered yet. And then that goes off, right? And if I think that that's not going to happen and it happens, it could throw me for a loop. I could really question everything, right? But if I understand that that could happen, right, and I'm aware of that, when it does happen, it won't be a shock. One of the things we don't want to do in these teachings and practices is get rigid about it. You know, oh, it's got to be a certain way. No. If you want to really make the most of your practice and make the most of this learning experience, be playful about it. Be curious about it. Oh, I just want to see. I mean, I learned more about meditation and developed a meditation practice more quickly by just experimenting. I heard about all the different techniques and everything, but at one point I just sat down, and practiced with my eyes open, my eyes closed, right? Just stayed still. Stay silent. I just want to see what's here. I just want to see what happens. So I would sit for an hour and a half straight. Of course, it's challenging, right? Yeah, but I was willing to go through that. It's not going to kill me. I was willing to go through that. I wanted to see what this is like. What happens after 45 minutes, right?